So in the next session, we've talked a lot today about the importance of a strong public defense. And we've sort of talked about from the most abstract levels of this idea of people, not only is it a constitutional right, but people have this right to procedural justice, to feel represented, to feel like they got the defense that they deserve. And when you move from sort of those broad notions of it's the right thing to happen, we go to the concerns that when people don't receive adequate counsel, that they're sentenced to too much punishment. They have things that shouldn't be happening to them. But at the nightmare level, right, and it's a nightmare that's too often has come true, with more than 300 DNA exonerations alone in the United States, including 18 people exonerated by DNA from death rows across the country. At the nightmare level, when we don't provide effective representation, what we get as innocent people that are convicted. And so we wanted to put a face. To what happens when we don't have effective counsel. And so we're honored and humbled today that Gary Drinkard has agreed to come and join us and to talk about his experience being wrongfully convicted, as in wasn't there, didn't do it, wrongfully convicted and placed on Alabama's death row. And so Gary's going to talk to us for a while today. He's part of a program on Witness to Innocence, which is founded by Sister Helen Prejean, and is comprised of people who are on death row and have been exonerated and their families. And we'll hear more about Renee Hutchins later today, but for now, let me just say that she's not only a professor at Maryland Law School, but she also worked for the organization as a criminal defense lawyer at the Southern Center for Human Rights that Steve Bright founded, and that's an organization that was vital in overturning Mr. Drinkard's conviction. Thank you.
So thank you, and thank you, Rob, and good morning. And just to be clear, I did have the privilege of working at the Southern Center for Human Rights very briefly, very early in my career, but I deserve absolutely none of the accolades for the phenomenal work that the center did on behalf of Mr. Drinkard. I was not there at the time. That is truly their victory to claim. So I'm just here to facilitate the conversation. But as Rob mentioned, we are joined today by Gary Drinkard, who spent 6 years on Alabama's death row for a murder and robbery he did not commit. The murder and robbery was of a gentleman who sold cars and car parts for junk. And Gary's half-sister
Yes.
is the one who was his accuser. After disastrous representation by two trial attorneys with no criminal experience. So we're going to hear today about his experience, and I was hoping you could start us off by telling us, how did you first learn you were being accused? So sort of where were you, who told you, how did you find out you were being accused?
Well, the first time I learned about it was the police. Let me start from the beginning. As I know it, my half-sister got stopped for some type of traffic violation. She went and told the police she got caught with cocaine in her possession. She told the police that, or they told her if she'd make a deal, she'd tell her something, they'd let her out of it. She told them that her half-brother told her he robbed and killed a man. So they said, well, we'll suspend this sentence or whatever. And in order to get evidence against me, the police raided my house and her house to get her boyfriend to testify against me for marijuana. We had marijuana in the house. My half-sister sold it to me. They did that trying to get evidence against a murder case. They arrested myself and my wife for the marijuana that was found out in an outbuilding, and they carried us to jail. During this time, I'm thinking, well, they're going to ask me about the drugs. I'm not going to tell them because my sister had sold it to me. And they didn't ask me nothing about the marijuana. They asked me about a murder. And I didn't know nothing about a murder. I kept telling them I didn't know nothing about a murder. And they browbeat myself and my wife for 4 or 5 hours before they charged us with marijuana and gave us a bond and let us go.
And what were you thinking at the time? Were you thinking at the time, this is ridiculous?
I was thinking it was ridiculous, but I couldn't figure out where it came from. I had friends in the judicial area, and I put out feelers, to find out where it came from. And one came back with me and said it was a blonde-headed woman close to you. Never in my life did I think it was my half-sister. Mm-hmm. I couldn't figure out who it was that would have said something like that because I was at home with my children. I had recently been hurt on the job. I just got a workman's comp settlement, had just got a Social Security settlement. We had bought some land. We were fixing to build our dream home. I had enrolled in college. I was fixing to go back to college to get a different vocation other than construction. And for someone to accuse me of a murder was just ludicrous. I mean, I had no idea where it came from or why. And with the police just beating me to death about it, it kind of scared me. And the next day we went and talked to an attorney, and he said, don't worry about it. So we went home and really didn't worry about it, went on about our business until a couple of weeks later.
And then it took a couple of weeks then for you to actually be formally charged?
Well, it took a couple of weeks. During this time when they let me out on bond for the marijuana, they sent my half-sister in wearing a wire, mm-hmm. unbeknownst to me. They arrested her and her boyfriend for they were doing burglaries in the area, they were doing robberies in the area, they were hooked on cocaine real bad. They arrested him to get him to testify against me. Mm-hmm. They told him if he didn't plead guilty, if he didn't testify against me, they'd get him for one of the crimes that they'd charged him with, and the result would be he'd spend the rest of his life in prison. So of course he's going to testify to anything they wanted him to.
Right, and in the 2-week period, you said your sister came in and wore a wire. What happened with that?
It was garbage. She came in. We didn't know she was wearing a wire. She had on a dress, which was unusual. Looking back on it, you see things and they become clear to you. But she came in wearing a wire under her dress, and she brought in a newspaper and she was talking about the murder. Well, we were commenting on it, that was a bad thing. Hope the people get caught, blah, blah, blah. But we never said anything that would implicate myself or anybody else, in the commission of the murder. And the lead investigator, he said he was outside in his little van listening on the headphones as her and I were talking. And he said during the conversation that he heard me say that the old man grabbed me and I went for my gun.
Did you say that?
No, I didn't say that. I didn't say nothing like that. And that's really what got me convicted in the first trial, in my opinion. Because everybody believes a police officer. Most common people believe a police officer. And he was a lead investigator, supposed to be very knowledgeable about things. And when he got up there and testified to that, then that's really what got me convicted in the first case. That's my opinion.
Okay, and tell us a little bit about that trial. So when did you said you had talked to a lawyer with your wife. Yes. Was that the lawyer who represented you at the trial?
No, we couldn't afford him. So I was appointed a couple of attorneys. Well, actually, I was appointed about 3 or 4 attorneys. Each one that seemed to be pretty decent, the prosecution would have eliminated. Mm-hmm. I wound up with a couple of attorneys that filed Facebook motions. I got to see them probably 10 minutes out of the 2 years I waited in jail on the trial.
They would come to see you out at the
No, they
jail?
didn't come to see me. No, they didn't come to see me.
So when did you get to actually have some FaceTime with your lawyers to prepare for this case?
I think at the arraignment, I got maybe 10 or 15 minutes with them, and then maybe a week or 2 before trial, they came for 10 or 15 minutes, asking me to give them questions that they could ask the people, and then they didn't ask them.
They were asking you to give them questions for cross-examination for the witnesses?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Do you know if they did anything else to prepare for the case beyond talking to you for 10 or 20 minutes?
They did get maybe $1,000 for an investigator, but all he did was go out and no, nothing. In the second case, it was so different from the first. It's unreal. The first attorneys did nothing. They did have an investigator. He did nothing. The money that he got, he probably ate lunch with. He probably took his family to a movie or something. But for as far as investigating my case, no, there were several witnesses they could have got to testify in my case, and I would have never went to jail, or I never went to death row. But no, they didn't. Just textbook motions. I could have done them myself.
And so what was going through your mind? Because you are facing the death penalty. You are accused of a capital murder, and you've got two attorneys who are not, in your view, doing their job. From what you can see, they're doing nothing to prepare. What is going through your mind as the process is going
They're
forward?
telling me, I wait 2 years in the county jail on this trial. They're telling me the whole time. I'd call them when I could get through to them. They'd tell me, well, it'll happen in a year. Year comes around. They're saying, okay, it's going to be a little bit longer, something happened. But the whole time, and I didn't realize it, they were allowing me to go see my personal doctor. My personal doctor was prescribing me pain medication and muscle relaxers, which was keeping me happy. I mean, in my mind, it was keeping me happy, but it was getting me killed because I didn't realize exactly what they were doing. They were placating me so I wouldn't really see what was going on. And I really didn't until, I guess, about 2 or 3 months before the trial came up. And I knew I was going to be convicted. I
Why?
knew
Why'd you know
well,
that?
they weren't doing nothing. You talk to people that's in there, and we call them cop-out lawyers because that's all they do. They'll let you sit in jail for so long, and they'll come say, well, if you don't plead guilty to this, they're going to give you 1,500 years. Well, why are they going to give me 1,500 years if you represent me? I mean, it's absurd.
Did your lawyers ever come to you with any plea offers? Did the prosecution ever make, if
The life without parole.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you refused to take it?
Of course I did. I didn't do anything. Why am I going to get up there and plead guilty to something I didn't do?
Were you ever afraid that the lawyers that you had were not going to be capable of presenting your truth as they weren't, and so a plea would have been a better option for you? Did that ever cross your mind?
No, I knew that you would get a better appeal process if you were convicted of capital murder. So I didn't even put up a mitigation defense on the first case.
Okay. So they
Because
didn't,
the judge we got word that the judge has told one of his secretaries if I put up some type of mitigation defense that he would give me life without parole. And I didn't do nothing. I'm not going to get my mother and my family up there crying and begging for my life when I hadn't done nothing. And I told him no.
so you accepted a death sentence so that you could be represented by somebody effectively?
Yes.
Wow.
And there are hundreds of cases there. When I went back to trial for the second time, of course I had better attorneys, thank God, and better help with Mr. Bright and Mr. Jaffe. But there were kids there. I mean, one was going to plead guilty to a burglary case. I said, what's the evidence in the case? There's none. My ex-girlfriend had told the police that I burglarized the place. And I told him I'd beat his rear end if he went and pled guilty. He didn't, and they let him go.
Okay.
I mean, it's ridiculous.
This is when you were pre-trial, waiting.
Yes.
Okay. After you were convicted, so after your lawyers had done this atrocious job for you and you were convicted and the death sentence was actually imposed, and I know you said that you were waiting, hopeful that the appellate process would be better, would provide you with better representation, but did you ever hit a point where you just lost hope, where you thought, gosh, I made the wrong choice on this one? I shouldn't have made that choice.
No, not really, because I mean, I'm a person. I make up my mind quick, and I live with a decision. I make bad decisions sometimes, and make good ones sometimes. And that was a good one, in my opinion, because I did lose hope several times. Because you sit down on death row, and you see people going back for a retrial. They're at court 6 months to a year, and they come right back to death row because they got the same shoddy attorneys. And that gave me pause to think. You see the appeals courts writing crazy whatever they write.
Opinions.
Yep. Yes. Thank you. They write crazy opinions. In my case, the first opinion from the Alabama Appeals Court, it was crazy. I mean, they talk like, yes, the prosecutor done errors, but it was not bad enough to give you an appeal. And you begin to wonder. You think, well, I'm gonna walk around that corner like a couple of my friends did, because you make friendships with the people there. Death row is not like prison populations. I've been in both. Prison populations, it's wild. It's deathly. It's like the Wild West. On death row in Alabama, it was like sitting in here. I mean, you could talk to people reasonably. There was no fights. It was unreal. We had physical contact with each other. We had physical contact with our loved ones during visitation. I know on some death rows it's not like that, but Alabama was unique in that area.
Now, you were being represented while you were on death row, at least for a portion of the time, by Steve Shopman, by the Southern Center.
No, I was being represented by Equal Justice Initiative out of Alabama, Brian Stevenson and Randy Suskin. Randy Suskin was my appeals attorney. They had appointed me an appeals attorney from the county that I had been convicted of. I knew right away that I wasn't going to get anything from an attorney there. So I asked some of the guys in there, who can I write? Who can I get as an attorney? And they told me Equal Justice Initiative out of Alabama. And I wrote them and begged for some help there. And Randy Suskin was appointed to my case. And he's the one that perfected my appeal and won me the appeal.
Who was representing the rest of the guys on the row? So were they getting the same quality of
No.
representation?
There were many guys there that didn't have representation.
At all?
No, Mr. Bryant wouldn't fly around the country. He would try to get anybody, that he could representation, but you just can't get enough lawyers to go represent people. There are hundreds of people there now with no representation during the Rule 32 or passed, and they're just waiting to die. They're really just sitting there waiting to die. And I mean, you try to forget where you're at. You try to live through pen pals or something like that. Most of your family leave you. Your loved ones leave you.
Did your wife stick with you?
No. About 6 months after I was arrested, and I told her, because in my heart I knew, they were going to convict me. The way the attorneys were acting, if they won't talk to you, won't listen to you, won't do any investigation, you ain't got nothing coming. Mm-hmm. I mean, you just got to deal with it. And I told my wife to find somebody else. I knew she was going to need help with the kids, and I told her to find somebody else. And she thought I didn't love her. We've talked about that since, but that wasn't the case. I thought the people was going to kill me, so I told her to find somebody else.
How old were your kids at the time?
My baby girl was 6 and 9.
And what has this process done to your relationship with them?
Well, it just put it on hold for a while. We're a loving family still. Even my ex-wife and I still love each other. It's just too much water under the bridge to get back together. We've grown too far apart. We still have family get-togethers. I mean, we're still a loving family. We've all got quirks, even my kids.
Every family does.
Yeah. Well, from that situation, we've got quirks, but it was a harrowing experience. It really was.
And so what would you say? So some people would say, well, Gary Drinkard is an example of the fact that the system works perfectly, that the mistake was caught, that Gary wasn't executed, and so the criminal justice system is doing exactly what it should be doing.
Yeah, it does it like it wants to. That's why I would laugh at that very, very hard. The only reason I'm out is by the grace of God and some decent attorneys that listen to me. Mm-hmm. I wrote letters to every attorney I could get a address to, every journalism professor, everybody. And most of them wrote back, we can't help, we can't come that far, we don't have the resources. One excuse after another, and you start to give up hope. And one attorney out of Birmingham, he's, because you can't write all your story down.
Right.
If you write your whole story, somebody out there's going to turn it around. I mean, Geraldo Rivera came down there one time before I got there, and some of the guys said, "Oh wow, he's going to get our cases out in front of the limelight, and we're going to get some help." And it was a joke. He turned everything they said around on them. And you're afraid to tell anybody the whole story, so you just try to tell bits and pieces to some people and see if they'll respond. And if they'll respond, you tell them a little more, and you kind of feel where they're at, and you kind of get a little trust in them. And that's how I did with an attorney out of Birmingham, Mr. Jaffe. Mm-hmm. And he wrote back once and said, "You're really not guilty, are you?" But he said, "I can't take a case unless you can get me appointed, or you can pay my fee." And Lord, I didn't have the money to pay his fee, and I didn't have any type of influence with the judge, so how was I going to get him appointed, you know? And it's a catch-22. What do you do?
And so what did they ultimately do? So if you could just share with you, what did they ultimately do to get your conviction overturned?
They done thousands of hours of investigation. They did thousands of hours of preparation, or hundreds at least. And they knew what the DA was going to, and what his witnesses were going to say before they said it. They knew how to prepare for them.
Did they meet with you more than 20 minutes?
Oh Lord, Mr. Bright had a paralegal that kept me from going crazy. She did. She was a paralegal investigator, and all I had to do was call and say something's going on, and she'd be there. They came and basically shut the jail down because it was so overcrowded. It was, I mean, there were people sleeping on the floors. The federal judge said it was something like a slave ship in the 1700s, and it really was. I mean, it was ridiculous how the people were being treated there. And Mr. Bright and the Southern Center for Human Rights did that. In one instance during the second trial, they listened to me. I mean, I didn't have a lot of sense about the law, but I had a little bit.
Just tell us the right.
When the lead attorney got up there and was testifying, well, no, I'll back up. He hadn't testified yet. An FBI man, he was supposed to be an expert in the tape. He had tried to enhance the tape, and he did a little bit, but you really couldn't tell what was being said, just bits and pieces of the conversation. And somewhere I'd seen on TV, because that's all you get to do on death row, mainly watch TV. Seriously. That was my best friend. I had seen where it goes through the recorder before the investigator or whoever's listening to on the headphones hears the conversation. So it's got to be on the tape if he heard the conversation. And I had my attorneys go ask that FBI expert about this, and sure enough, he said that was true. He said the investigator was lying if he said he heard something that he couldn't hear on the tape. And of course, the district attorney, the prosecuting attorney, he has to run over there and see what we're talking about, or what my attorneys are talking about. And then he has to clean up his witness before we crucify him, or before my attorneys crucify him, which they were going to do. And he had to get up and admit he made a mistake, that he didn't hear that, or that something went wrong, that he didn't hear it that way. And, you know, for them to get up and admit they made a mistake like that was crucial. I mean, that was really crucial.
Well, I didn't know if you wanted to turn it over to questions. No? Okay. I am deeply grateful to you for being here and for
Thank you.
sharing your story.
My pleasure.
I am delighted that EJI and the Southern Center were ready and able to step in to do phenomenal work.
They were,
to
and they
correct
did.
injustices. Yeah, so I thank you for being here.
Well, thank
I
you.
really thank you for being here. I have enjoyed talking.